Hi everybody. So today we are going to do some weaving. We're going to weave on a paper plate to make a circular weaving. So I'm going to show you how to get started on this. So in your kit you're going to have a paper plate. You could take markers or paint and draw or paint on your paper plate before you start weaving if you want there to be a background behind your weaving. It looks really nice. After you create your background, if you want to do that step, we'll get started with our weaving. So we're going to start off with cutting some slits in the cardboard plate where our yarn will go. So I'm just going to start us off. I've drawn some numbers on here so you can see where to make those cuts at 12, 3, 6, and 9. So just like on the clock. So I'll go ahead and make my cuts. Okay, so I've got my cuts started right there, and you can see that I cut about this far down, just like on the rim of the plate right there, okay? Now I'm going to add in my other numbers here. So I'll do a 1 and a 2. I already have my 3. There's 4, 5. I have the 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. You don't have to make all of these numbers, but if it's easier for you, you definitely can. So now I'm going to make another cut. I'm going to make more cuts, all of those numbers going all the way around my plate. All right, I almost have all of them done. All right, so now we're going to make the weft for our weaving. So I'm just going to take my yarn. I'm going to start up here at 12, and I'm just going to put my yarn right through there. See how the little tail just kind of hangs down in the back? Okay. Did I just say weft for weaving or warp? We're making our warp. I'm not sure what I said. But here's our tail. It hangs down. We're going to go from 12 all the way down to 6 down here, okay? There should be one really long piece of yarn in your kit and some other smaller, shorter pieces of yarn that we're going to use for the weaving itself. But you can always add more yarn if you have some at home, okay? So now I'm going to go up to number 1, and I'm just crossing behind on the back here, and I'm at 1, and now I'll go over to 7, so it looks like this. So I went from 12 to 6 to 1 to 7, crossing over in the back of my plate. I'm going to 2 and then over to 8 right now. And then 3 and 9 and 4 and 10 and 5 and over to 11. So this is the warp for our weaving, okay? And now I just have this long tail on the back, so I'm just going to trim that off. If these little tails on the back are kind of getting in your way, you could always tape those down flat. Okay, so we're going to get started with our circle weaving. Let's see, I have some of this rainbow yarn right here to get started. I'm going to tilt my screen down just so you can see a little bit better. I'm going to kind of gather my yarn up. I just wind it around my fingers like this, so I have like a little skein like that. Okay, I'm going to leave the tail end, and we're just going to do a simple under, over kind of pattern. So I'm going to start under number 12. I'm just leaving my tail under there, going over 11, under 10, over 9, under 8, and I can kind of spin this around as I go. So I'm under 6, over 5, under 4, over 3, under 2, and I'm just going to keep going around. And I made a mistake, but the nice thing with weaving is you can always go back and you can fix that. Okay, and you can also kind of tighten this up so it goes more in the middle. All right, so now I'm on my under here and my over, under, over, under, over. It's just a pattern as we go around in our circle. All right, and if at any point you see like, oh, this is getting a little bit loose, you can just tighten it up as you go. And I'm gonna keep weaving around and around. I'm just keeping with that under over pattern as I go. And you can see that my weaving is getting bigger. Now the nice thing about doing a painting or a drawing on your paper plate before you start weaving is that with this kind of weaving, we're going to actually just leave the weaving right on the plate. It's going to be part of the design. So if you have a nice painting or drawing behind that, it'll be almost like a frame for your weaving. So you might want to consider doing that before you actually start the weaving. And I'm almost done with this piece of yarn. When I'm done with that, I can add on a new piece of yarn. All right, so I'm almost done going around in my circle here. And I think I'll just leave that little tail right down there. And now I'm going to get another piece of yarn. This time I have kind of this thick piece. This is a great project to use different weights and thicknesses of yarn. And I'm just going to tie these two pieces together. You could also just leave your little tail kind of hanging down. That would be just fine. Since we're not using this for anything functional, it's okay to have those little tails just in the back. Okay, so let me just gather up my yarn here. So my last one that I did was an under, so I'm going to go over now, and I'm just going to kind of tuck that knot right under here. Okay, and I can just kind of make sure that that stays under while I'm weaving with my next piece of yarn. So anytime that you want to add more yarn, you can. You just tie it onto the piece that you started with. Adding a background to this is that you can kind of let it show a little bit. You could just do some weaving in the middle part and then have your background painting or drawing showing through. You can also weave this all the way to the very edge of your paper plate if you really get into weaving and you want to keep going. You can just keep adding more yarn until you get to the edge. All right, the other nice thing about using some thicker yarn is the weaving goes a little faster because the thick yarn takes up a little more space on your warp. So it's kind of nice to have a combination of the thick and the thin, maybe some with some different textures to them. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of tuck that right under there. And I've got my weaving. Whenever you want to stop, you could either tie a couple of your little ends together under there when you reach the last one, or just put a tiny little piece of masking tape on the back of your weaving. You won't really see it because your weaving is just going to stay on this background plate like that. So here's 2 weavings that I've done so far, and I can't wait to see what you guys do with your weaving. Have a lot of fun and send us some photographs. All right, thanks guys.